Anatomy is a game by indie developer Kitty Horrorshow, where you navigate through a suburban home, collecting cassette tapes that explore the different rooms of a house, likening them to organs in the human body. While strange, maybe a little gross even, nothing about this concept is, well, scary. Yet, in spite of its otherwise mundane premise, Anatomy is terrifying in a way that very few games are. Yes, the sound design and low lighting are obviously there to create a sense of dread, but there's something more profound about the horror of Anatomy beyond the basic elements that can be found in every other horror game. The most obvious place to start analyzing why Anatomy is so effective at scaring us is the setting. Unlike most horror games, the setting isn't just a backdrop for horror to happen in front of, made up of generic shadowy objects. Instead, the house is the main driver of all the horror. Its spaces are intimately and totally tied to the experience of the game. Upon a first playthrough of the game, the house is as standard as a house can be. The sense of familiarity in the space is so strong that most players will be able to navigate the unmarked doors without thinking, easily, subconsciously locating the master bedroom, garage, or basement. In Anatomy, you aren't exploring a house, you're exploring your house. This feeling is certainly heightened by the lo-fi graphics of the game, and imagining the small details I drew from memories of my childhood home, a cookie-cutter suburban house not unlike the one I was exploring. I'm sure that many other players do the same, even if they didn't think about it. After the initial creepiness has worn off, navigating through the house in darkness is fairly trivial. Every part of the home is exactly where we expect it to be, exactly where we would have put it. Though there's still a basic human instinct that makes the darkness frightening in a visceral way, it's something everyone has gotten used to, and the familiar layout of the house protects us. Striding confidently through the halls feels normal, standard, until the end of the first playthrough. After entering the master and picking up the tape on the bed, you fall back into routine, turning to make your way toward the kitchen. Only there's no door. It's gone. This is where the discomfort and the horror really begins. The final tape plays, ending,
"It is here that we place ourselves most at the house's mercy, and spend each night hoping that it will not bite down."
and the metaphor of a living house starts to feel less like a metaphor. Anatomy has no jump scares, so the horror comes entirely from our own expectations of the spaces presented by the game through each iteration. The house grows gradually less familiar, creating a growing sense of unease and discomfort, or as Freud puts it, the uncanny. In his essay of the same name, Freud dissects an analysis of uncanniness by German psychiatrist Ernst Jentsch, who believes that uncanniness arises from intellectual uncertainty, something the observer is unfamiliar with and is unequipped to navigate. This definition makes sense, and the unknown is an obvious source of horror for works like those of H.P. Lovecraft, which center around cosmic threats that prove near incomprehensible. However, as illustrated by Freud, there's another type of horror or uncanniness that relies on the familiar, or on revealing something dark within the familiar. He shows us by looking at a German word, heimlich, which can mean belonging to the house, familiar, comfortable, but at the same time can also mean concealed, kept from sight. Freud writes, "Among its different shades of meaning, the word Heimlich exhibits one which is identical with its opposite, unheimlich. What is Heimlich thus comes to be unheimlich. Everything is unheimlich that ought to have remained secret and hidden but has come to light." Anatomy captures the idea of unheimlich and takes it to its natural conclusion. Instead of focusing on something familiar or belonging to the house, the game focuses on the house itself. The parts of the house which were once familiar are twisted to become uninviting and confusing. It is now that the choice of a basic suburban home is revealed to be more than a decision made out of laziness, but the most important element of the game. To create a powerful feeling of unheimlich, you must first create an equally powerful feeling of heimlich. Every single detail has been placed with immense care to create a setting that the player could, almost literally, explore with their eyes closed. Anatomy expects this familiarity, relies on it even. After a second playthrough of the game, you begin to notice certain details feel wrong. Paintings shift orientation or flicker out of existence. A medicine cabinet is turned to face the wall. Strange geometry seems to reach through the ceiling. As you go through the same steps as the initial playthrough, you collect the tapes all over again. This time, the audio is more distorted, almost indecipherable at points. The house feels more alive. It moves, something we know from our past playthrough and also through visual elements which change in real time. The discomfort of observing something we know should be lifeless, yet not being able to shake the feeling that it somehow is, feels in line with Freud's idea of uncanniness. The house is still familiar, but there's the intense feeling of a secret revealed, something we were never meant to see, something the house doesn't want us to see. By the third reset, the house threatens to tear itself apart at the seams. Paintings engulf some of the walls, doors lead to nowhere or to shifting walls of flesh. Furniture has affixed itself to the ceiling. Upon finally entering the basement, teeth begin to emerge from the ground as tens of red light crisscross around you. Another tape plays, this time making obvious the fact that the house is indeed alive, and worse, it doesn't want us here. It's a moment of utter dread, unmatched by most other horror games, or even horror movies. The name, Anatomy, is fitting in many ways. The game itself is not only a dissection of a house, but a dissection of the psyche. Anatomy knows exactly what we seek comfort in, what we use to escape the horrific, and it extracts them, twists them. It preys on our expectations, slowly stripping away any sense of security. A perfect distillation of true, inescapable horror. Future horror games should look to Anatomy as a masterclass of emotional manipulation, for its ability to set up expectations and shatter them in the same breath, and for its chilling atmosphere created despite extreme constraints. But beyond any of these horror triumphs, designers should look to Anatomy for its ability to keep players scared beyond the boundaries of the screen. You see, the sense of Unheimlich created by Anatomy doesn't go away when you close the game. It forces you to consider the comfort and security you take for granted every day. The shadows that used to just be shadows now feel like they did when you were a kid. They feel like secrets. Each creak in the night sounds like a sigh, a groan. This pervasive terror is unlike any other horror game I've played. When you turn off a game that relies on the fear of the unknown, you are transported back to the familiar. Any unknowable threat is thwarted by the comfort of four walls. Walls that don't move, and walls that never fail to keep us safe. But, when you finally shut down Anatomy for the last time, the familiarity that was once a reliable source of comfort, a respite from the horror, is now the source of our fear. This is the real power of Anatomy. The true feeling of vulnerability, of being at the mercy of the things that used to be familiar, of Unheimlich, remains long after you stop playing.